So tip number 4 is experiment. What do y'all think is important about having an attitude of experimentation? This would be an audience participation moment. Yeah. So if what you're doing isn't working, you've got to be willing to try something different, right? Absolutely, to get a different outcome. How does the word experiment tie into the fear of failure? Yeah.
I think when you're experimenting, you're allowing yourself to maybe have an outcome.
Okay.
So you're embracing failure. Scientists don't expect to get right answers.
So Jennifer's comment was that when you have an attitude that you're going to experiment, that the fear of failure kind of diminishes because you're not necessarily expecting 100% success. And she tied it back to scientists. There's absolutely nothing in the world that guarantees that every scientific experiment is going to be successful. It just doesn't. But you come with that frame. And again, this is a huge mental shift if you can go, I'm going to experiment with this. Now, can you experiment with everything? No. Would the government and IRS get kind of cranky if you decided to experiment with some of the tax regulations? No. They probably wouldn't be very happy with you. In healthcare, there are certainly things we can't experiment with. Can, no matter what is going on, can we experiment with the safety of our patients? Never. Ever. Okay, that cannot be experimented with. What happens? Yeah, go ahead. The question is, before you can really experiment in a way that would be useful, do you have to have kind of the problem dissected, know your approach? And I would say absolutely you need to know what it is that you're trying to get to. Absolutely, because that's certainly a piece of it. Otherwise, you're just shooting in the dark. Scientists always come with some sort of a hypothesis. It may or may not be accurate, but it's giving them more information. And I know in my world in healthcare, one of the things I have told people is if we try something, assuming it's safe to experiment with, if we try something and it didn't work, we did not fail. We have now eliminated that as something that's going to help move us forward. So let's try something else. It was not failure. It was a lesson learned. It was something that didn't work. And I'll give you all an example. We have, in healthcare, one of the major things that you want to avoid is you don't want patients getting infections in your hospital. Right? There are certain things that happen in hospitals that predispose patients to infections. When you put a line in a patient to give them medication or give them blood or do other things, you increase the likelihood because you've kind of got a foreign body. Right? So there are just certain things that just increase the risk. There have also been, kind of the evidence-based practice, they call them bundles. So they have said after experimenting and doing research that if you do these 6 or 7 things, then you are less likely to have an infection happen in your patient. And so we had our staff doing audits, and their results were 100% of the time we were following the bundle, except we still had patients getting infections. And I said, one of 2 things is true. Either we're not doing it right 100% of the time, or we are, and there is something else that contributes to these infections that we haven't isolated. So your task is to look at what else we can try while we continue to do our audits and while we continue to hold with these 6 things that we must do and see where we end up. And I'm just tickled to say that they were able to come up on their own. These are frontline staff, so it goes back to the engagement question. They were able to come up with on their own something that has made a huge difference and has been spread system-wide to benefit all the patients that come into our hospitals because they were able to figure out something else to try. But you can't experiment on everything, and you have to know the difference. And so if I were to ask y'all what can't you experiment on, again, you could probably tell me really quick. But what you need to think about is, well, where can you experiment? You may not be able to experiment with the end result. If it's regulatory, you don't have that option, neither do I. Sorry. But you certainly do have more opportunity to probably flex in how you get there. And again, I'm not talking being illegal or unethical or anything like that. But just again, we get back to that railroad track sort of thinking. We get so laser focused we don't see the other options and we trap ourselves.